Exploring further into future-ready banking, let's now take a deep dive into how do you leverage technology to enhance loyalty, to enhance experience. Let's try and get a 360-degree view of what is possible with technology. And joining us for that, Shalini Warrier, Executive Director, Federal Bank, banking institution, of course, that's been around for 9 decades now, and is getting into the decade all future-ready. And Geeta Gurnani, Country Head, Modern Work at Microsoft India. Geeta, Shalini, thank you both so much for joining us. Shalini, let me just start by, as I said, organizations like yours have been around for nearly a century, but the experience that is being offered now to customers, radically different. And I dare say as we go further into this decade, the experience will be even more radically different 5 to 10 years from now. Would you agree with that? That the change you're seeing now is more radical than anything we've seen in a long time?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here first and foremost, Vikram. But to your point, absolutely. I think leave alone the last decade, if you just look at the last 4 or 5 years, the kind of changes that have erupted in the banking space in India are phenomenal. And I think it's been contributed by many factors. First has been obviously the whole jam trinity, as we kind of call it in the banking circles, the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile kind of congruence that has happened. That has helped make a lot of stuff on the banking side easier for customers and more accessible. The other is this the whole ecosystem of what fintechs is about, and the emergence of so many fintechs in the economy. Coming together of all this has enabled banking to become a lot more accessible, as I said, to a lot of customers, but also easier, intuitive, and more customer friendly. That's really what's happened in it. And I'm sure as we go along the conversation, we can explore some more angles to this because there's a lot happening in the banking space and at very interesting times, I must admit.
Right. Banking, of course, Geeta, would be a microcosm of what is happening elsewhere. I mean, if you look at it 10 years or 15 years ago, if you could say, I know how to use Word and I know how to use Excel. And by the way, I have some skills in PowerPoint. You were there. You were completely, sorted out. You were tech savvy. Now, of course, it's very different. You need to know how to use Teams. You need to know how to collaborate with people in different locations and the skills, how are you posting documents on the cloud and retrieving them from the cloud? What you need to do in modern work today is radically different to what it was even 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct, Vikram. And I think, as you rightly said, and I think I'll just quote one of Satya's conversation where he said that we saw 20 years of digital transformation actually happening over a year during the pandemic, right? That's the kind of transformation happened. And just taking a clue from where Shalini left, I think employee experience is one big pillar of digital transformation. And I think customer experience is another pillar. These two pillars actually need to go hand in hand as we talk about the digital transformation part of it, right? I think from an individual perspective where we are seeing, and you rightly called out the team's part of it, that in the new tech world or in the new digitally transformed world, I think there are 3 things which are becoming important for employees. One, how is the ease of collaboration within and across the team? Because now there is a lot more cross collaboration which is required across different parts of the bank. Let's say if we're talking from a banking industry perspective. Second, complete access to the knowledge. The knowledge nowadays actually is all across. It is on emails, it is on documents, it's in business application. And think about as many chat applications people use, right? The messaging application people use. So your information is actually all across. So individuals need to be really careful about that, from where to really access all of this information. And the third one is the process simplification. I just want to cite one of the example. I was with one of the banks last week, and one of the thing which they told me that there are close to about 200 internal applications across the domain, which employee need to talk about. And you were just innovating around idea that super app for customers is the one thing which I think banks have already started the journey. How great it would be if we think about a super app for employees, which can actually create a very empowered employee, which can then deliver a exceptional customer experience from that perspective. And when we were discussing, then bank said, what better platform than Teams? That Teams becomes my operating place, and then I bring every internal app and make an employee super app on the Teams part of it. So yes, Vikram, you're right. I think the definitions of tech are changing. The tooling on which employees need to be reskilled is changing. But I think thanks to the teams and other collaboration platform, this is really making easy for employees to adopt in the digital and the hybrid world.
Yeah. When it comes to the information part, Geeta, if I could just take you up on that a little further. So, one is you're right in saying you have to look at what the customers are getting, and you have to look at how employees, what is it that employees are seeing. You're right that there's a lot of information. In fact, some would argue that now there's too much information, right? Information is coming to you from everywhere. Being able to curate it, being able to manage it, being able to understand it, being able to assimilate it, and then therefore being able to use it in your day-to-day life. Has that already become a challenge, and is it going to become even worse or tougher?
I think it's becoming tougher, I would say. But at the same time, I think organizations are also saying that how do I differentiate between information and insights? Right? These are two different things. So, yes, the world is becoming more complex with the information, but I think as we synthesize it using the analytics part of it, using the various tools which are available, I think actionable insights part, I think, Vikram, I believe will become easy with the intuition of the AI, ML, and the different parts of the analytics.
So,
Okay.
Vikram, if I can just kind of take that forward, if I may. So I think Geeta was right. Information has moved from information to insights, and I think it's gone one step further to implementation. Because what we have done, for example, in Federal Bank is take that information, convert it into a propensity model using artificial intelligence, analytics, machine learning, etc., and push it in a form and fashion to the front end where when the customer contacts the contact center, customer gets onto the mobile banking application or walks into a branch for whatever reason, the person is able to immediately say, hey, guess what? We have this insurance product which we think is most appropriate for your needs at this point in your life cycle. So information is kind of necessary, but definitely not sufficient. It's got to move on to insights, as Geeta said, and then move on further to what can be used from an implementation standpoint. And that's really what organizations like us are working towards.
I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that technology is going to play a bigger and bigger role. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. Use AI, use ML, derive insights, and say this is what will happen. Perhaps the only problem with that, at least in the way AI is today and the way the algorithms run today, is yes, they can give you those insights and they can do a lot of prediction. This is what the person will probably like. What sometimes are lost is serendipity, right? Sometimes when you actually have a human sitting across the thing, you say you just get an insight. You just get a piece of intuition says, although nothing really tells me that this person would want an insurance product something tells me that maybe I should try and talk this person into an FD for whatever reason. And that serendipity is something that AI sometimes can struggle to deliver.
Which is where I think our mantra has always been, Vikram, digital at the fore, human at the core. So we say, yes, all of this is digital. We will deliver everything to a customer through digital means. We will have all the digital capabilities. But I don't think anybody can take away from that human element. We've been expanding our relationship managers. We've been expanding branches also in this day and age, etc. Because we do believe at the end of the day, there is that human element because you're bang on, Vikram, to say that the model may say offer an insurance, but based on just a couple of conversations, you realize that maybe a fixed deposit is a better product. The model may not say that, and that's where the human element comes.
Geeta, do you think that will work in both when it comes to customer facing and employee facing, that it has to be human plus machine, a hybrid solution and not one or the other?
Absolutely, Vikram. One of the important parts, Shalini, and you mentioned about that human intelligence actually iteratively retraining the model. I think one of the things we forget is that the models trained once, they don't have like a life cycle, right? They need to be continuously fed with a lot more feedback loop, for a lot more information to enrich that model on the ongoing basis. And I think that is where we say it's like an interaction between human and the machine, which is going to be important. And I think the role AI is going to play largely is to take away the mundane task of analyzing a lot more information. But the feeding part, training part still stays with the human. So I believe that would continue and it will be more like a assisted customer experience, I would say. But if I can keep having recommendations coming up, I think it can make my entire interaction better. And you can also handle, Vikram, the people iteration part, right? The speed at which the resignation happened, the speed at which the workforce changes. How do we ensure a seamless customer experience if we let it to only human intelligence part of it? So I think those are the few things of seamless and uniform experience is what this technology will bridge the gap, in my view.
All right, I just want to go a little bit deeper into those two things that Geeta had said: customer facing, your basically your consumers. What are they experiencing, and how is innovation being delivered to them, and then what happens with employees? So, Shalini, if I could ask you, when it comes to, obviously we're seeing dramatic changes in fintech, as we've already said, including a large number of startups starting to come up, who are now starting to work with more established, companies like yours, and then the entire layer of really powerful cloud and other solutions that the more established, that big giant corporation, the established corporation like Microsoft and others are delivering. All of these tools are there. How do you use them to deliver innovation and a better experience for the customer?
Yeah. So I'll split this into two parts, Vikram. The first is I'll talk about fintechs and that ecosystem. So we've realized that fintechs are an integral part of the ecosystem. Our philosophy is branch light, distribution heavy, which means, yes, we will have branches. They do a range of services, but it's more important to have distribution to reach customers. So we've adopted a philosophy which says collaborate with fintechs rather than compete with them. And through that, we've put the underlying infrastructure in place like API banking, etc. And we're reaching out to a range of customers through that. As an example, we've got two propositions out there where savings accounts are opened. Nearly 15,000 accounts get opened every day through those, purely digital, completely done through apps, etc. Expanded my distribution about 3 times of what I used to have earlier before I tied up with fintechs. We do believe fintechs give the right kind of customer experience. Banks may not necessarily be able to give that, but banks bring trust, banks bring safety, banks bring security, banks bring a brand name, banks are which hold your money eventually. So, that whole element of kind of faith and trust comes in. The other is what we're doing internally. And a good example of that is what we've been doing over the last 1 year with artificial intelligence and our chatbot. Last year in the midst of the pandemic, we actually launched our chatbot called Fedi. And at this point of time, Fedi is able to handle multiple queries from customers, from the mundane to the slightly more sophisticated ones. And it's learning. To Geeta's point, it's learning every day based on what comes. The intention being that for those customers who would prefer to deal with a bot and don't want to call the call center, walk to the branch, this capability is available. And that's purely driven by artificial intelligence, cloud-based from a technology standpoint, very light on the infra requirements within the bank because it's all handled through this cloud. So I think getting the right customer experience through fintechs, through using artificial intelligence, cloud are all part of the strategy for the bank. And that's not just unique to Federal. I'm sure it's true for all other banks. Ultimately, it is about the customer getting the right experience.
Geeta, anything you'd want to add to that? Delivering a better experience for customers using advanced technologies. How do you make that experience more future ready as we go forward?
No, I think as Shalini called out very rightly, I think I'm only thinking that as world is moving to the metaverse experience, I think the technology will further add that to the customers who really want a more immersive experience. And if you want to really give them an experience that they're sitting right across in the bank, talking to the branch managers or to the sellers. But I definitely think that metaverse will definitely bring those immersive experiences because I think as a human, we are very used to of that kind of an experience, which probably we don't get when we interact with the bots.
Right. Yeah, I'm waiting for the metaverse. What I really want to do is start doing interviews in the metaverse where everyone thinks they're sitting inside the room and actually participating in the conversation and having a discussion. So, all right. Moving from the customers to employees, and let me start with you, Geeta, this time. Obviously, when it comes to the employees, technology is enabling them a lot. We also are probably looking at a large number of organizations that though they are moving back now increasingly to offices, but there might be elements of hybrid that will still remain, and they have to be empowered to keep that going. How do you see the employee journey moving in the months and years to come?
I think employee journey, on the one side, it's exciting that you are opening the doors for employees or the workforce which was otherwise not available to you. I am talking about the gig workers that who are able to now be part of the workforce, and they were not part of the workforce because of the hybrid. But I think the challenge everybody is facing is that how do you enable this whole hybrid as a model? I think it's pretty cool to say future of work is hybrid, but it's very difficult to conduct a meeting when 50% of your team is in the room and 50% room is outside of the room.
Yeah.
So how do you create that inclusive environment for your team that the one who are on phone or on the virtual don't feel excluded from the room, right? So I think the employee experience, the pieces of it at Microsoft, Vikram, we are looking at three parts. We are looking at, and we call this as a three P's. We call people, places, and process. We are saying for every organization, the blueprint could be different, but it will move around these three pillars. So the first is that think of employee experience beyond simply onboarding and then leaving your organization. There is so much they do in between. So, how do you ease out their entire journey during their tenure at your organization, which means process simplification, tooling available to do the better collaboration part of it? The second is the places. And I love this quote, which we use now, which we say that how do you design meeting rooms for the people who are not in the room? Okay, and if you see the way Teams is evolving now, we recently introduced a feature called Front Row, where the people who are actually not in the room are given seat on the front row in the Teams window, where people feel that they are more involved. The third pillar is the process pillar, which I think I addressed earlier also, that how do you bring everything what an employee does in the day of the life, right? Which is if Teams is my new workplace in the hybrid environment, or for some of my team members, if Teams is a workplace every day and few are sitting in the office, how do we make that experience uniform in terms of bringing every application what they access into this workplace, right? So I think this people, places, and process, this operating model, every organization need to think as they think of hybrid.
So one more quick follow-up question to that would be the same question I was asking earlier about serendipity, right? That famous, coffee break experience or the water cooler experience where you're just walking past somebody and you say, hey, what have you been working on? And the person says something and you start a conversation and that leads to something. Many of us feel that that's what we miss the most during the year, when you are entirely, completely hybrid. And that's when going into the office enables those conversations. You say, new employee, hey, hi, who are you? What have you been doing? That sort of a thing. How can that be enabled in a hybrid world is, I guess, one of the other things I'm sure you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some of our customers actually building those applications to enable informal conversation. We actually went live with Genpact recently on the water cooler app, okay, which says that how the employees interact with each other informally onto these platforms. And since you're familiar with the which is a new employee experience platform Microsoft launched, in that there are two important components, what we call Viva Connections, which actually bring a lot more expertise as you get into your work. And it also tells you that your peers, whom are they being connecting with, who are the experts in your organization. But access to the information, as you said, Vikram, like in terms of how to have the handle of all the information which is lying all across informally. In Viva, there is an AI-enabled knowledge management, which is what we call Viva Topics. Okay, it says that if you are looking around fintechs, let's say Shalini, in your organization, if a new joinee just comes and say fintech because he's not aware who is working in federal on fintech, he will just get a sort of information saying that which are the multiple documents lying around fintech, who are the experts who are working in the fintech in the federal bank, and all of that information really comes to those individuals. So I agree, Vikram, that building social capital in hybrid won't be easy. I think there are a lot more effort required. So tools can enable a little bit, but I think it will also require a lot more process change also within the organization to increase these informal conversations. But I think it will be a process plus technology which is going to enable this whole social capital.
Right, that's really interesting. Shalini, your sense on that, how do you improve workforce efficiency and collaboration, and how do you get the culture in the organization changing, all the way from the boardroom all the way down?
Yes, and I think it's honestly quite difficult in banks like ours, which are spread across the length and breadth of India, with I mean nearly about 75% of my workforce in branches, right? Through this pandemic, we've had this challenge where we've had to keep branches open, but some of the head office functions could work from home. I think the biggest one that we've seen to our advantage is actually communication. I have to say the Microsoft tool Yammer, which I didn't hear Geeta talk much about. Teams we use extensively, but we use Yammer extensively actually. Yammer has become such an integral part of our lives. It's kind of something where it starts off with the fact that every Sunday my CEO Sham actually posts something on Yammer. Every Sunday he's been doing this now for I think about 2-3 years now. And it could be on anything. It could be about something that happened in the industry, within the bank, something that's imminent in the bank. And that then triggers a whole host of reaction from people. Somebody says, oh yes, but did you think of this one? And somebody else says, no, but did you think of that? So that has a momentum of its own, which kind of engages everybody for the couple of days. So this has been one effective tool that we've used from a communication standpoint, the Sunday posts on Yammer. We also run something else on Yammer called Nayi Soch, which is where we encourage the frontline to actually put in anything that's troubling the customer, because sitting out here in head office, you have an illusion that everything is all right sometimes, but it's only the branch guy who's probably dealing with the customer, or the call center guy who's actually listening to the customer, who says, guess what, if you just change your flow this bit on Fed Mobile, which is our mobile banking, it would make things so much easier for customers. We kind of collate it, work on it, go back onto the platform to confirm we worked on it, and then we kind of, generate some excitement around that. So I think the point that is being made is, there's nothing that can substitute for effective communication up and down the line. And breaking the hierarchies that are quite common in organizations, either because of legacy or otherwise, breaking those barriers through tools like Yammer, we use Teams extensively, makes a big difference.
Right. I think we could carry on, but I know we are flat out of time. So one last quick question perhaps to you, Shalini, is one of the things that we briefly touched upon only is obviously safety and security. And for a bank, I guess nothing more important than safety and security and avoiding fraud. As you become more and more tech-enabled, more and more of it is happening on the mobile phone, more and more of it is possibility of phishing attacks and other stuff. How do you ensure that there is safety and security?
So I think there are two parts to it. One is on the technical side. One example I can give you is we use something called a Trustier, which is a product that we use on our mobile banking. By its very name, it denotes the fact that it's a very trusted application. So it's got a stamp of trust. Hacking, and I think it doesn't work, for example, in unsecured Wi-Fi's. It wouldn't work on hacked phones, etc., etc. So that's more the technical side of it, Vikram, which banks do. But I think the bigger one is communication, because again, customer awareness about this is still very low, despite the proliferation of digital transactions, despite the fact that UPI has grown so much and become such a prominent instrument in the country. I must admit, awareness and literacy is still low. The largest amount of losses we see are very, very basic and simple things. OTP revealed over the phone. Using social media, we run a series called Twice as Wise. So we tell people lots of snippets, simple things. Your password should be, something like this. Never ever reveal an OTP. What happens if an OTP is released? So it's very simple. It's done both in English and in the vernacular so that people can relate to it. So I think between all the technology safeguards we can take at one end and a commitment to make sure customers are aware of what are the risks out there and what should they take as precautions, between the two, we've made a lot of progress in the last few years. This is a journey. It never ends.
All right. Final words on this entire program from you, Geeta. On fraud or other big trends that you see coming in the workplace in the next few years?
I think the one thing I want to call out is how digital tools really move beyond offices, which means to the entire frontline community. And Shalini, you just touched upon the entire security and safety of the customers. I think what also worries me that more often than not, employees actually use many casual platforms to exchange the business information, right? They don't use the enterprise managed messaging platforms to really do the information exchange about the platforms and do the business conversation. So I think for me, how digital will move beyond offices, reach to the branches, reach to the fleet on street from a banking perspective will be very, very critical. And second part, of course, I think all of us are witnessing that employee well-being will be the another important currency, or care will be the another important currency, because if you can't have happy employees, empowered employees, I think they won't be able to deliver the kind of customer experience we are talking about. So I think leveraging technology to also really look into the well-being of the employees will be the another important trend, which I definitely think is going to shape up the choice of the employers by employees, and it will be one of the big trend of the workplace which employees will choose.
All right, I think that's an absolutely fascinating discussion on where we are heading with the tech world in general and banking in particular. Thank you both so much for speaking to us.
Thanks, Vikram. Thanks,
Thank
Shalini.
you. Thank you, Geeta.
Thank you so much.